Donald Trump has struck what he characterizes as a fatal blow to Joe Biden's electric vehicle ambitions. Trump recently vowed to reverse the government's push toward electric cars, telling ordinary working Americans that initiative is, in his words, a big scam. According to him, Biden's sweeping emissions agenda is an existential threat to traditional automakers. Despite the president's grand plans to accelerate the transition to EVs, in this narrative, Trump positions himself as the champion fighting for gas-powered vehicles, promising to roll back mandates and save the common man from burdensome green regulation. Picture it. Trump is back where he thrives, delivering impassioned speeches, championing gas cars, and tapping into widespread frustration over rising auto prices. He argues that electric vehicles are out of reach for most people due to their sky-high costs, and accuses EV manufacturers of exploiting that cost disparity, calling them stupid or gutless for pushing expensive, China-dependent vehicles onto the American public. Fueling that fire, Trump casts the push for EVs as a jobs catastrophe waiting to happen. He warns that the rise of electric car production, which typically relies on fewer parts and simplified assembly, threatens to devastate auto sector employment, especially in regions like Michigan, where manufacturing remains the lifeblood of local economies. He proclaims that Biden's policies play into China's hands, citing concerns about EV supply chains heavily reliant on Chinese rare earths and battery components. Now flip the narrative to what's happening under Biden's administration. Automakers such as GM and Ford are indeed investing billions into domestic EV production, with Michigan fast becoming a hub for new assembly lines and battery facilities. Yet Trump argues that this expansion doesn't equate to job retention, because EVs simply don't require as many human hands to build. Efficiency, in this lens, becomes synonymous with fewer jobs and lower wages, an exchange Trump portrays as a raw deal for blue-collar workers. Meanwhile, anecdotal stories accentuate his point. One owner, let's call him Scott, ended up paying a staggering $22,000 to fix a minor dent in his Rivian EV after a repair chain snarled for months. Another EV driver in California shared how cold weather caused his vehicle's range to plunge by 30% in 5 minutes. Such tales, Trump uses them, highlight what he sees as systemic flaws: inadequate repair infrastructure, exorbitant insurance, and questionable battery resilience. S&P Global, he claims, reported that over half of EV owners are considering returning to petrol or diesel for their next vehicle. Under Biden, the rollout of stringent emissions targets is accelerating. The EPA recently revealed a proposed tailpipe emission standard so aggressive that, by 2032, nearly 2/3 of new U.S. vehicles could be electric. This policy is structured not as a mandate to sell EVs, but as a barrier encouraging cleaner vehicles, effectively forcing manufacturers to adapt or exit. Estimates anticipate that these emission standards could avoid nearly 10 billion metric tons of CO2 through 2055. Natural Alignment has those passionate about climate mitigation praising the move, while industry representatives argue the pace is untenably steep. Automakers themselves are speaking up, pushing back on the regulatory momentum. GM, Ford, and others have sounded alarms over costs. Ford, for instance, reportedly lost billions across its EV division, and GM's bottom line took a serious hit as well, highlighting to Trump and others that the EV hype hasn't yet translated into sustained profits. Even Tesla has seen margins compress as competition grows and affordability remains elusive. The average price of an electric vehicle still hovers near $58,000, well out of reach for many middle-class buyers, despite incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act. Yet the Biden administration insists infrastructure and affordability are cornerstones of its strategy. Charging stations are spreading more rapidly than ever, and federal tax credits are working to reduce purchase costs. Meanwhile, semiconductor shortages and battery supply constraints remain real impediments. Critics argue supply chains are too fragile, and scaling battery manufacturing to meet lofty demand targets will be a Herculean challenge. Back to Trump. He's framing himself as the populist alternative, less spectacle, more practical. Vote for me, he proclaims, and I'll halt this EV madness. His plan, he says, isn't to energize the EV market, but to restore balance. Under his vision, hybrids and gas vehicles would see renewed support, EV prices would be forced down, and charging infrastructure would be bolstered, all while protecting auto jobs, maintaining energy independence, and resisting what he calls undue reliance on China. Recently, tensions have spiked between political players. Elon Musk, long known for his Tesla leadership and erstwhile Trump indifferent political posture, has apparently pivoted. Reports suggest Musk is now backing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and urging Trump to step aside. Trump and Musk, once remotely aligned, now appear to be pitted against each other in a high-stakes battle over the future of electric vehicles and American industry. The broader EV industry seems to be in flux. Ford is said to be losing upwards of $36,000 per EV sold, while GM faces expected losses exceeding $1 billion. But it's not only domestic icons feeling the pressure. Toyota, once quiet on electrification, has signaled caution. Tesla, though still a pioneer, grapples with falling margins and uncertain demand. Consumers remain skeptical. Limited charging networks, still steep prices, and inconsistent performance in varied climates all contribute to hesitation. Now let me add some of the latest developments to enrich this story. First, auto giants are publicly readjusting their targets. For instance, Ford recently admitted that some of its EV launches are being delayed to prioritize profitability over pace. Toyota is quietly doubling down on hybrid technology and seems in no rush to go fully electric domestically. Stellantis, the automaker behind Jeep, Chrysler, and others, has also slowed certain EV expansions, citing supply chain costs and European economic uncertainty. Second, recent public opinion surveys indicate that while awareness of climate change remains high, enthusiasm for all-electric vehicles has moderated, especially among rural or working-class Americans who view EVs as more symbol than solution. Many cite concerns about charging availability, battery replacement costs, and the environmental impact of mining for EV batteries. These concerns dovetail perfectly with Trump's messaging, fueling his rallying cry that EVs harm working Americans more than they help. Third, energy markets are shifting. Oil prices recently ticked upward amid global supply tensions, making gasoline more expensive. And for some, this is renewed incentive to consider EVs. However, battery metal prices, like lithium and cobalt, have concurrently surged, driven by global demand for energy storage and limited mining capacity. This price pressure filters into EV costs, reinforcing Trump's narrative that EVs are built on anti-competitive supply chains fraught with foreign dependence. Fourth, legislative developments are stirring the pot. A bipartisan group of lawmakers just introduced a proposal to extend EV tax credits, but with stricter domestic content requirements. The idea: encourage electric adoption, but only if key battery components are American-made. Automakers have mixed reactions. Some welcome any incentive boost. Others worry this would further strain production and speed. Lastly, state-level dynamics are adding complexity. California recently tightened its zero-emissions vehicle rules, requiring that by 2035 all new car sales must be electric. But dozens of Republican-led states have passed resolutions rejecting such mandates or rejecting federal linkages, creating a patchwork of conflicting regulatory environments. It's in this fragmented territory that Trump situates himself as the savior of freedom of choice in transportation. So as the nation steams toward 2025 and beyond, we find ourselves at a crossroads, a debate teeming with competing visions. On one side, you have Donald Trump, and an argument rooted in job protection, affordability, energy sovereignty, and skepticism of an under-infrastructured electric future. On the other, Joe Biden's administration pursues a clean energy transformation, ambitious emissions targets, expanded EV access, and a federal commitment to decarbonizing transport, even amid business pushback and community hesitations. In the months ahead, watch for how automakers respond. Will they double down on EVs, hoping incentives and infrastructure catch up? Or will they pivot back toward combustion and hybrids until things stabilize? Keep an eye on how battery material supply chains evolve. If geopolitical friction escalates, tariffs or sourcing blocks could become real flashpoints. Note also whether public sentiment shifts again, as gas prices fluctuate or as consumers experience EVs firsthand in diverse conditions. And of course, midterm election outcomes and upcoming presidential debates could change the entire narrative, turning headlines from EV market crashing to EV comeback or gas-powered rally. In sum, this is more than a car-type debate. It's a microcosm of broader generational, economic, and geopolitical currents. Will America pivot toward a cleaner, electrified future, or will it stalemate in political friction and practical hangups? The outcome isn't predetermined. What's sure is that both sides have stakes worth watching, and the next chapters could redefine the path of mobility for generations to come.